I think it's very safe to say at this point that Bob Iger is by far the worst Disney CEO of all time based on how he handled multiple ratings disasters and box office failures when it came to movies and television shows. When you really bundle that all together, they have lost billions of dollars in the process for 7, 8, 9 years now. But when you're looking at the overall scenario of what happened with Snow White, what happened with the Acolyte series for Star Wars and Lucasfilm, and especially with the Ironheart series most recently, that's just to name a few, by the way. Those are real big examples of exactly how Bob Iger really doubled down on the typical DEI agenda to please the top 3 shareholders, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. Well, just recently Bob Iger made a very swift move, a move that I actually feel is a negative one. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. Now, if you think Disney couldn't get any worse, it actually really just did when you really look at the entirety of Disney right now and exactly what path they're heading towards. Now, one thing is for sure is that we already know that Bob Iger is still embracing his typical cost containment plan, his cost-cutting strategy that is now resulting in thousands of employees getting fired across the board. That's going to actually happen at a progressive rate. Now, we already know that there's a lot of things going on there between Bob Iger, the board of directors, the many executives over at Disney, and everyone in between. However, to top things off here and exactly what's going on with the firings situation between Bob Iger and the many employees associated with the Walt Disney Company, with the Walt Disney Company dealing with serious consequences as a result of Bob Iger's DEI agenda and ongoing box office failures and ratings disasters. One major development going on now involves more to do with Disney CEO Bob Iger and how he recently decided to fire thousands of employees yet again, much like how he did this back in the end of 2023 into early 2024, as you guys may recall, as this is part of his cost containment strategy. Already both Bob Iger and the board of directors made a swift move after their agreement to fire thousands of employees that stretch across multiple brands and areas within the Disney company, and already this is creating a very divisive moment both within the corporate ladder at the company and within the board of directors. For starters, Bob Iger already made the move to fire many employees associated with the handling of Disney Plus, such as the marketing teams behind multiple projects and those handling promotional pieces for varying projects. Now, cast and crew members are also said to be laid off from Disney Plus related to projects in a desperate move to create smaller scale projects to test the waters if they can keep things afloat for Disney Plus. The more significant firings, of course, are in play right now are going to deeply impact those as well at Pixar, Lucasfilm, and Marvel Studios. Also those associated with upcoming Disney live-action remakes, where each film and/or television program being developed for the future will have a smaller scale production to save costs and funds. Hundreds of Pixar employees are also going to be a part of these firings, related to the latest box office disaster for Elio. To top things off as well, however, Bob Iger and the board also agreed to lay off employees in the theme parks around the globe, and those also involved in other brands like National Geographic and ESPN, and other brands associated with, of course, Disney Plus. Now guys, let me just say one thing about that. They're firing the wrong people as far as I see it. The people that they need to fire are those specifically handling everything Disney. I think that, of course, you have to look at some of these, directors and writers over time that were specifically handpicked by Bob Iger that are all for the DEI agenda. They need to go, just as an example there. However, this is where it really gets interesting, is that all of these firings are said to total around 2,200 to 2,500 employees, set to be fired throughout both 2025 and 26, progressively, for Bob Iger to actually slowly minimize costs toward both film, television, and other forms of programming. Now, multiple members of the boards, of course, were completely against this idea by both Iger and, however, they fell within the majority. The majority of the board actually are those that are still backing Iger to this day in 2025. To make matters worse for Bob Iger is that this is also creating tons of tension from executives related to both Lucasfilm and Marvel Studios, as they are going to be dealing with tougher and tighter budgeting restrictions for their films and television shows. Now look, that's exactly why a lot of upcoming projects associated with Star Wars or Marvel, they're going to be more smaller scale productions, right? Not all of them, but a large chunk of their productions will be smaller scale based. And look, this is all a part of Bob Iger's typical cost containment strategy. It's been going on since 2023, which was the early phase of it all, and now you're pretty much getting into the final phase of this cost containment plan from Bob Iger. And look, this is all happening in real time before he begins to step down in 2026. He's trying to build up a legacy, and you know what? What a so-called legacy, right? If anything, this is going to make you look as a very desperate and poor CEO by really firing thousands of employees, firing the wrong types of employees in certain areas to actually just cover yourself up at the end of the day, right? And it's only going to make matters worse over time. Now, Bob Iger is already planning, get this, to make a public statement about these firings in the coming days to address both the shareholders and those that are loyal to the Disney Company about where the future lies for the company. This is all a sudden move by Iger after so many box office disasters and ratings failures combined. Now look, we already know that Snow White as a whole, that was a movie that really was one of the final nails in the coffin for Disney, and arguably, the final nail in the coffin for Disney live-action remakes, specifically based on animated classics. You're hearing crickets right now when it comes to the Tarzan remake, when it comes to other remakes out there like Sword in the Stone, and even Alice in Wonderland, and among others out there. They even wanted to expand the Lion King movies by doing a Scar movie that would serve as another prequel to the Lion King 2019, and the list goes on and on. You're hearing a lot of crickets for those projects, and I think it's all related to the fact that they were way too expensive, they were overfunding those projects, and it really makes you wonder, where is all that money going, right? Now look, we know at the end of the day as well that Bob Iger purposely overfunded those projects for obvious reasons. This was all, by the way, to please BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, the top 3 shareholders. They really wanted these movies to be up front and center, to actually embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that entire plan is now quite messy. It's really not all that organized anymore, and that's why you have some board members that are in favor of Bob Iger, and others that are just not supportive of Bob Iger anymore, and that's exactly why he's going to be stepping down in 2026. Now, I pointed this out as well. I think that you're going to get somebody worse, if not worse, somebody probably just as bad as Bob Iger, whoever takes on the mantle of CEO of Disney in 2026. It's going to be quite interesting. Now, look, we know that there's also a lot of other drama going on with Lucasfilm, where Kathleen Kennedy is prepping to step down as president of Lucasfilm, and how that's going to actually create another, wave of negativity for obvious reasons that they are beginning to embrace. We know that everyone wants Kathleen Kennedy out of Lucasfilm. Everyone wants Bob Iger out of Disney. Those are the two major personalities, two faces that people don't want to see anymore connected to these overall companies. But overall, I would love to hear what everyone has to say about all this below in the comments. Anything ranging from the firings to the damage control. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I'll catch you guys later.